Okay. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Very first order, I'll take a couple of minutes, if I can, to thank our Coquitlam Fire and Rescue Department and a whole range of other people. On Saturday morning, early hours, about 4 a.m., an alarm went out about a fire in an apartment on Howie, just kind of a block and a half behind the McDonald's on Austin. Fire responded very quickly. They were able to put the fire out amazingly in a 40-year-old wood frame 3-story building, amazingly quickly, and contain the fire damage to 2 units. Unfortunately, one woman, a 40-year-old woman, died in the fire, and that tragedy, however, was averted in many other ways because of the quick work of the fire and rescue. We want to acknowledge the crew, and please pass on our thanks to the crew as well as to all of those and our city staff in emergency social services who were able to deal with the evacuated approximately 60 households that were evacuated for that night. We know that about 2/3 of them now are back in the units. There are 3 fire compartments in the building. 2 of them are up and running again. So the occupants have been able to get back in their units. The remaining 24 or so are not in yet. But there's a lot of people have been doing a lot of work, and I want to acknowledge all the city staff, all of the volunteers, Tzu Chi, who actually came forward and were able to get some additional assistance to some of these folks who didn't have much to be able to tide them over for a few days. So I want to thank all of those folks on behalf of Coquitlam City Council and our community. Thank you. And our deep condolences to the family of a 40-year-old victim of this fire. Mr. Clarke.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item is the minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, November 18th, with the recommendation to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Zakora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is the minutes of the Coquitlam Evergreen Line Public Art Task Force meeting of Tuesday, October 15th. Recommendation to receive.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is minutes of the Finance Standing Committee meeting of Tuesday, November 12th. Recommendation to receive.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is minutes of the Finance Standing Committee meeting of Wednesday, November 13th. Recommendation to receive.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is our first item from the public hearing this evening. This is City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4418, and it pertains to 606 Chapman Avenue. Staff recommendations that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4418.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. I'm going to...
Do an amendment.
We didn't have any discussion whatsoever about the development, and that's great. I think obviously the city staff have worked well with the proponent about making sure the development was appropriate for the neighborhood. City staff also worked hard to make sure that the amenities were appropriate for what we consider to be of today's standard. We have lots of neighborhoods that would be complaining if we didn't pave the pathway or if it was kept to 6 feet wide or something like that. And here we have a neighborhood that's actually asking for less. And we heard from impassioned residents about the fact that they wanted less. And so I think it's appropriate that we contemplate how to make sure that we not only are able to build a great neighborhood, but one that meets the expectations of the neighbors. And in this case, the neighbors clearly, I think there was a false start as well. We started out as a lane. We perhaps didn't communicate particularly well, or they didn't hear it when we said, okay, it's not a lane anymore. It's now a pathway that's built on a lane width. I would urge us to either contemplate the same right of way with a 6 foot wide or 2 meter wide, 2.5 meter wide pathway, perhaps meandering across it with gardens or whatever, or even narrowing the amount of take that we have from the property in this case. We have got some challenges to deal with on Chapman. Chapman's, we've said it before, we need to get in front of this one and try to solve the challenges that Chapman has created, that rat running has created on Chapman and North Road, because I don't want to see us face a tragedy along there, but also because these neighbors deserve for us to be able to find a solution to the very high speeds that these cars move down. So I'm looking to, I can't move an amendment, but I suspect someone's going to either move an amendment or else we're going to see some kind of consensus come out of this as direction to staff on this issue. So, Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much. You know, I was just delighted that I was pushing for a public information meeting for these residents. Can you imagine what could have happened in there without the public meeting with the residents in the area? You know, I mean, I think we need to learn a lesson that anything like this, doesn't matter what it is, there should be a public meeting in the area with the residents. I'll tell you right now that I will, you know, as far as the development is concerned, those 6 houses, I didn't hear any too much negative about that, but the pathway. So unless the pathway is guaranteed for me that it will not be touched, it's going to stay in the natural state, I'll support the rezoning. But if I cannot have that guarantee, and I'm going to make that a motion, that the path stays in the condition that it's today, natural condition, without any paving, without any widening, whatever it is. Whatever the residents said tonight, I appreciate what they said, and that's what they want. And it's unanimous. It's not something like somebody got up and said, oh no, just a second, my neighbors don't know what they're talking about. I wanted this pavement and everything else. It's our staff that are pushing it. Now, I don't know. Somebody's not getting the message when there are 50, 60, 70 people turn out to a public meeting and telling you, no, don't touch it, that somehow we're trying to ram something down people's throats. This public hearing tonight would have lasted about maybe 5 minutes if we would have just listened, but we're not listening. And you leave it to the council members to sit here. We've sat here since 11 o'clock this morning. Very, very soon, by the time everybody talks, we'll be here 12 hours, 13 hours, 14 hours. I mean, you know, I don't need to be put through with that kind of stuff. The staff has got to get the message. Or what is the residents telling you? I don't know how much more I can say it. So unless there's I'm guaranteed, and it's engraved in stone, the pathway will stay the same in its natural state, I will not be supporting this rezoning. And it's unfortunate. Okay? It's unfortunate.
Okay, Councillor Sikora, staff do follow not only guidelines that we as council accept and instruct them to. I think it might be inappropriate to blame staff for the standards they're trying to apply, but I think there are lessons to be learned here, and you
better believe there is lessons to be learned. You're right.
That's what I just said. Thank you. Jim, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you, Worship. We do listen, and we will. There's a takeaway from this one. I guess, and I see every councilman wants to speak, so I'm sure there's a whole round of ideas on this. But perhaps if I could assist with this, I guess there's a couple of options. We can go by the book, which I mean the bylaw, and that's we have that led to the discussion in the first place. There's a standard that meets engineering specifications and all that. During the course of the public hearing, we heard some comments and some suggestions coming out. It probably could be a modified standard, something that Your Worship, you're just mentioning in your opening remarks there, a narrower width. The other option would be, as Councillor Sikora's stated a moment ago, just leave it as it is. And so that sort of gives you the range of choices that you may want to look at. Would really recommend, though, that the right-of-way be secured to the subdivision, because this is the only time you'll have that opportunity. And what I would do is, and maybe this would argue for the third option, leave it as it is, because I really think it's not just focusing on this one particular section of pathway. It's a broader neighborhood issue, and I think it really deserves that look, maybe it's through the neighborhood plan process, look more broadly at Oakdale, because there's a whole system of pathways and roads and dead ends and roads transitioning into lanes. I think the whole area needs to be looked at in that context rather than try to resolve something based on one rezoning and one subdivision.
And if you look at a bylaw that's been adopted by council in 1993 with my signature on it that talks about Nicola and other things, dig that bylaw up and I'll tell you what it says. Okay, very, very simple. Just follow it. You know, I don't think it was such a bad bylaw of the day that the council member and the mayor today agreed to. So with me, it's very, very simple. I'm going to listen to the rest of the council members, but I certainly will not be supporting this if the pathway is anyway going to be jeopardized.
What was really interesting tonight is we saw, you know, history, 50 years history, clash with the, you know, the needs of today while we're trying to plan for the residents of tomorrow. And it was really an interesting, you know, this is where we've come from, this is what we want today, and staff and everybody's sort of trying to think, well, is this what's going to be right for 50 years from now? You know, I believe that, you know, we have an opportunity, we have one opportunity to secure this right of way, and we don't know that in the future we may need the width. You know, just for plantings or things. But at the same time, there's an anxiety or a concern that if we acquire too wide a piece of property, that it may someday be a road, the very thing they don't want. I didn't hear anybody say, I don't want a wide buffer, I don't want trees around it. What they said is, you know, there was some discussion about the surface of the pathway. But I'd like to say we should proceed with the acquisition of the property, but at the same time guarantee what the future use of that is going to be. And that's why earlier I asked the question about a linear park. Would a park, or even possibly a formal, you know, designation as a park or something, protect the land? It gives us the space, but guarantees that it's going to be always be a pathway. The pathway may be in various forms. We could put the plantings in there. We could leave the existing plantings for the time being, but eventually trees come down and, you know, nature takes its course. And the residents 20 years from now may be like the ones that sometimes come to us and say, I want more amenities, I want pathways, you know, in the future they may want that. But in the meantime, today's residents are saying leave it as it is. So I'm trying to find a way I can leave it as it is while still make sure that, you know, that in the future that we have some options, but that those options not go as far as being paved roadways. And so that's why, you know, I'd like to see if we can do some kind of a designation or put some sort of a covenant on it that this is our intention as we move forward, that it's a pathway and, you know, that it's not going to be a vehicle route. The other thing that concerns me, and we heard it, and it's related because normally when we have a subdivision like this, we hear about parking and traffic. And we did hear about traffic today. We heard about an existing problem, and a problem that the mayor has talked about just a few minutes ago, and a problem that I'm very aware of from 15 years ago from my traffic calming days, that there are traffic problems on Chapman, and we're going to add some more houses. Traffic calming costs money. But at the same time, maybe we have an opportunity to work with a developer to put in an amenity. And right in front of here is a crosswalk. We heard concerns about people exiting across Chapman. I think one resident said, you know, she follows the trail or pathway network, and her worst crossing is where she crosses Chapman. So maybe there's an opportunity for a raised crosswalk or something there at that property that we can possibly work with the developer to put in an amenity that I think the residents actually want, and you know, and to work with him or her, you know, work with the developer on some of these other things. So. I agree with the 6 houses or the subdividing part of this. I think, as I said earlier, we want to get the width, but I want to make sure that the future of this easement or right-of-way is always going to be nothing more than a park or a pathway, rather. Thank you.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you very much. I think the system has kind of worked pretty well to this date. You know, we had the original proposal here from planning to have the laneway. That seems kind of a reasonable thing when I first heard about it, but then the neighbor said no. Had a meeting, and the result of the meeting, planning department came back with another proposal for a path, but a paved path at that, a multi-use paved path. And we heard tonight that the neighbors are saying no, and council is here to make the final decision. I think we should be guided by a statement from our strategic plan that takes into account, that states, Coquitlam City Council is dedicated to the vision of building a vibrant urban city which values its diversity and distinctive neighborhoods. And that's a prime sentence right in our strategic plan for 2012-2015, so it's a little out of date, but that's the same thing. We're right in the middle of that. Distinctive neighborhoods. So maybe what we've learned through this process is that we have a template kind of in mind that we want to do all of these things every time that a development gives us an opportunity to make improvements around it. But do we have that template in place to take notice of the distinctive neighborhoods? I don't know if we do. You know, we're looking at this proposal. The original response from planning was to look at this just like it's in any other neighborhood. Yet, here's an important statement in our strategic plan that values diversity, and that's not just diversity of individuals, it's diversity of neighborhoods, distinctive neighborhoods. And this neighborhood has said how much it loves this path, although nobody's told me exactly what pin oak means, but sounds like a great name. So they've told us that loud and clear. So I moved enthusiastically the final readings of this bylaw, because I think the 6-lot subdivision is a very good subdivision, and I certainly didn't intend to end my comments there, because I too, like Councillor Sikora, Councillor Hodge, want something. Actually, I believe that the path should stay as it is, the option 3, what Councillor Sikora mentioned. And Councillor Sikora actually also mentioned you want something written in stone about this, and that's actually something I was talking this weekend about with actually Ben Craig when he called me for some more information. I said, you know what? Maybe we should actually write it in stone. If we decide to do this, have a marker there, a little rock marker that says, stone marker, where it's carved there, Pin Oak Heritage Path or Pin Oak Neighborhood Path. And actually have it
Cast in stone.
written in stone. So it'll actually be there.
How about in jade?
So, I don't know if we could afford your jade.
No, I'll give it for free.
So, you know what? We can't tie the hands of future councils 20, 30 years from now. I do agree that it's a good idea to take, or even 5 years from now, to actually, if the opportunity is there, we should take ownership of the right-of-way and everything like that. But keep the path as it is and write it in stone. Why not? That's a little extra expense, but I don't know what sort of motion we need on that. But that's the direction that I'm certainly wanting to give to our staff. Thank you.
They're going to accuse you of chiseling. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, to take a leaf from Councillor O'Neill's book, Quercus palustris, the pin oak or swamp Spanish oak, is an oak in the red oak section. Native to North America, mainly in the eastern United States, from Connecticut, west eastern Kansas, south to Georgia. And I could go on. When the branches die, they stay on the tree for a long, long time, so how soon we'll have to replant pin oak path is an open question. So the question before us actually is not about the path, it's about the zoning amendment bylaw, and I don't think there's any doubt that we'll all vote for the zoning amendment bylaw. It doesn't say anything about how the path will be developed. Mr. McIntyre talked about we have a bylaw and the bylaw sets standards, and maybe here we need modified standards, and I scribbled down Oakdale standard. And Councillor O'Neill makes the point that, neighborhoods are something that we celebrate. And Oakdale tries real hard to make us celebrate Oakdale, and they achieve some success sometimes. We could all go around here and come up with varying pieces of language about how this path should be preserved or only developed a little bit, and how wide, 3.5 meters, 2.5 meters, all the rest of it. I remember many years ago going to the University of Saskatchewan for about 3 weeks, and it was the beginning of summer and they had just opened a new building, and someone pointed out to me that there were no paths, and the practice at the University of Saskatchewan was to open a new building, and then when they saw where people walked, they built the paths. And that perhaps is how we should decide how to put the paths, or how to support the paths in Oakdale, by finding out what the people would like us to do. And I think our best course in terms of how to deal with Pin Oak Path and the paths of Oakdale is to ask for a staff report that tells us, that proposes how we will consult with Oakdale on what to do with that path. Leave it as it is. Eventually something will have to be done. We need probably a set of Oakdale path standards, so that when a path, when the pin oaks die and the branches fall off, we know what to do, what to go in, and how to re-landscape. And that's the best solution that I can come up with, and it'll get us out of here a little earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I'm fully prepared to pass this evening, but I had sort of drawn up what I thought would be an amendment. However, it can go on, as Councillor Nicholson said. We could spend 3 hours trying to wordsmith it, which I certainly don't want to do. My question to you is, I will certainly move second, third, and fourth and final readings of the zoning amendment bylaw, but will that in any way tie me to our current, the current rules and regulations under the bylaw? It will, won't it? No. No? In this case only, or normally it would, wouldn't it?
Mr. McIntyre.
Your Worship, on occasion through development applications, we've had some one-off situations. There's been, and it's in dealing with an issue, and options are come forward, and at the end of the day, it's council that makes the final decision and provides that direction back to staff and the applicant.
Okay, so direction will do.
Yes, if that in the end is the decision of council. That's why I laid out the 3 options. We could go by what's in the book now, the bylaw, a modified approach, or just leave it as it is.
Well, the only basis I will pass this is if the path is left exactly as it is, with the exception of the additional land that we are getting on the side of the subdivided property. But I have one more question. When we take that land, when we go from the next street from Nicola to Thompson, is that one as wider than the path now? Like, will they sort of match in width?
Through the chair, no. The section of the pathway south of Nicola, where Nicola will extend through down to Thompson, that's already a 6-meter wide right of way. So the area north is 3, so we're recommending adding the 3 to it. And direction to staff could not only be just around the leaving as its current condition, but also direction to staff in terms of this is an issue we would, my recommendation back to council would be something that should be addressed through the neighborhood plan. Because it's not just the pathways. Pathways are an important element, but we've heard other issues in this area tonight, roads narrowing down into lanes with poor sight lines and that. There's a range of transportation challenges in that area that need to be looked at in consultation with the neighborhood. And I think the proper venue for that is through the neighborhood plan process. And that if council is comfortable with that, that can be direction back to staff, so I'll make sure that we factor that into the work program that we'll be bringing to you fairly soon for that project.
It is, but in the meantime, before you get the neighborhood plan finished, because that's going to take a while and you've already got a full workload, I would just like to make sure that this path, which with its extended width by the subdivision, that we leave it in its natural state, except that we could enhance it with some more landscaping or trees if that's what the residents desire. So I'd like to have a consultation with them as to what additional little landscaping amenities we could put in it, but no paving as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rasmussen.
Well, I think, the people came here tonight about the roadway or the laneway going through, which is a big upset. And we had already made an adjustment through staff to make it a pathway. And I think council heard, or for an emergency, or pathway with emergency vehicles, we heard that the emergency vehicles aren't needed through that area, and so that we can keep it just as a pathway. And so I think that was a big concern, that people wanting it kept as a pathway. And I think most of all in council is in agreement with that, to keep it as a pathway. I do think, though, that we have, when I talk about universal accessibility, moving people through, not everybody said here tonight, just leave it alone. People did say, well, I understand the need for accessibility. I understand the need that paving may be a better option for that pathway. So what I do think we need to do is we need to do a study, as I think as Mr. McIntyre said, of the pathways in the Oakdale area, get a handle on all of them to standardize them. But I think you have to standardize them for the ability for everybody to use them. And I think, as Councillor Wilson said, we're not looking just at what today's users are, but what are the future users. When those houses move in, there's somebody's in a wheelchair or scooter or whatever, can't access that. And people says, well, I never see anybody go up and down that pathway in a wheelchair or whatever, because they can't go up and down it. They can't use it. So, I mean, that's the other issue, that people can't use it. And so the gates there also are not the greatest standards. I mean, bollards would still be better at the end than when those gates that are down there now to control and make people flow through there. So I think the issue that drew the biggest criticism was a future laneway. Now remember that the planning going back years ago had proposed laneways. That's why the requirement for the area, strip of land in that area, was put in there, and why staff had gone through that, because years ago a laneway was considered part of that development for a traffic flow. People don't want that today, but that's why the requirement for those easements were put in there. I agree we should take the land today, but through to staff, if we leave the pathway alone, the developer would have paid for the paving of the path, and if we come back later in this process with talking with Oakdale about all their trails, that funding will be gone and the city would have to pick up the cost if we were to repave it in a future date, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. It would just be for the works abutting this property, though.
I understand that. But that, when we talk about accessibility with curb cuts, let-downs, proper things for accessibility, we have been doing that on a 25-year basis, getting things more accessible. When the people first saw let-downs, people are going, oh my God, and it took years for us, I think Mayor Stewart can talk about that, to get a lot of the city's let-downs. We're still working on a lot of areas to get the let-downs in. So I just think, I hear whatever council's saying, just leave it the way it is. That's the simplest answer. But I don't think it really makes us up to the best standards of a pathway for everybody to be able to use it. And that's what we're thinking about, we should think about, is a pathway for everybody to use. So I hear what council is. I'm not going to stop this and fight this down, but I do think we're missing an opportunity, and this is how we get these pieces fixed over time, is through redevelopment and the opportunity for the developer to pay for them rather than the taxpayers. because it's like the sidewalk program, not having sidewalks in your area. We have a sidewalk program of $300,000 a year, and we've got a huge areas of the city with no sidewalks. Well, $300,000 doesn't get you very far, so it'll be another 30 years before we get anything all covered in this city. So we have to take the opportunities with new development, but council doesn't seem to want to do that, so they don't want to make it as accessible as it could be in the future, and that's unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zrillo.
Okay, so I'd just like to talk. Oh, right. First time I've talked tonight, so my mic's not ready. I'd like to talk about Nicola, the 3 frontages on Nicola. So that goes through the chair, if it goes directly to staff. So if we approve these 6 lots, we will have frontage on Nicola. And I'm just wondering, it says right now 6-meter road, so that's the portion that we will take for the road, correct? And then we have some, looks like maybe about 3 meters already there. So my question is, what is the width of that today? Not based on when we will get lots 607, 609, and 611A, but what will be the width today if we approve for the people who that will be the frontage of their home? And question, if that's the frontage of their home, they will be looking at the back fence, or I should ask the question, it's not Jeopardy, will they be looking at the back fence of that frontage on Thompson, lot 607, 609, 611, A and B? And if so, do we know the condition of those fences on those lots that front onto Thompson?
Your Worship, we can check on the right-of-way widths. I don't have that information at hand, but it is correct, as Councillor Zrillo said. If the rezoning goes ahead, the subdivision is approved, you could have an interim condition where there would be 2/3 of the road would be built, finished off on the north side, but unfinished on the south side. And yes, they would be looking at the back side of those lots in the interim period. We were out there today. I seem to recall there was fences and sort of outdoor and some landscaping across the back there. So that would be the interim condition to those property owners decide that they themselves wanted to subdivide their property, and then they would subsequently dedicate their portion, build their portion, and then just complete Nicola from east to west as it's been done previous.
So my comments on this bylaw zone amendment is that what I heard on the doorsteps over and over through the chair there is, these communities are going full steam ahead when some of our residents aren't really ready to go. One of my favorite sayings is chips make chunks, and I really would prefer that this was more of a staged approach. And when I say that, what I mean is to have the subdivision happen at 3 lots along Chapman and not make the people that decide to buy the lots facing Nicola stare at a fence for who knows how many years, could be forever. So my thought would be you put it 3 lots that all face Chapman, and at a later date, the people that bought those lots will have the opportunity to subdivide, but perhaps not until lot 607, 609, and 611A sell. So my thought process on this is, why do we have to do everything at once? Could we not have a staged approach where the neighborhood is maintained intact, that people don't have to look at broken fences, have half of a road? So those are my thoughts on that. I think that we should definitely plan for the future. I think that at some point, this probably will be, maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30, maybe it's 50 years from now, we may need to have a road there. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the path. It could be one of these other lots further down. But I just think a staged approach, we need to have plans for the future, but we should have tactics for today, because we're the people that have to live with it and look at it for the next 10 years. So my first thought looking at this is I would rather see this be a 3 subdivision piece that has the potential to be an additional 3 later than to give 6 now and make those 3 lots stare at somebody's back fence and have half of a road.
Okay. Is there a motion for second round of debate? Councillor Sikora wants to speak again.
Thank you very much, Mayor. You know, I think
I
that,
need a motion.
that the Council Reid mentioned that.
We need a motion for a second round of debate.
Okay, I'll move it.
Okay, moved by Councillor Sikora and second by Councillor Hodge. A second round. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, Councillor Hodge.
Thank you very much. I think that Councillor Reid mentioned he'd like to give it second, third, and fourth reading, and it's fine. But you know what? One thing that should happen. The fact is, you know what? We cannot live by what the future council may do, because this has come forward to us by the engineering department. What happens if there's a whole bunch of new faces in the next election, and they decide, the engineering department decides that the fact is we had this plan before council and there's nothing on the books that tells us anything different. So I'm going to move an amendment or a motion that the fact is that we approve the zoning for 606 Chapman Avenue subject to the pathway remaining in its natural state.
I could second that, but that's the conversation we've all been having.
I know, but you know, the thing is, I want it engraved in stone.
Well,
Very simple.
you just said we can't.
Yeah, that's what Council O'Neill said, is engraved in stone. So I said, okay, I'll give you a piece of, you know.
But you just said we can't fetter a future council.
That's right. But in the meantime, we can tie it down as we feel as a council today.
Until we change the bylaw. Yeah. So I mean, we can't make an irreversible bylaw.
I'm not talking about a irreversible bylaw. I'm talking about that I don't mind the zoning. We didn't hear not much complaints about the zoning, but we heard to leave the pathway alone. Now, how do we protect it? By just word of mouth? I don't think so. I think we need a motion to that effect.
I just asked Mr. McIntyre that.
Well, I understand that.
It should be part of the motion.
That's what I said.
And that's fine. So, Mr. Clerk.
When the issue was first raised, it was whether we needed a motion or strict direction to staff. So what I've recorded as direction to staff, which can suffice as a motion if council feels necessary, is that the path stay in its current natural state in general accordance with the opinions expressed by the residents, and that staff report back on how the city intends to consult with the Oakdale Neighborhood Association, not just the association, regarding its network of parks, paths. And as Mr. McIntyre pointed out, some of that can happen through the neighborhood planning process, or it can happen more immediately as staff figure out how they want to work with this new pathway.
Right.
The one problem we have the planning department saying one thing, there's an engineering department that are pushing this forward. So, you know, Mr. McIntyre can say whatever he wants. In the meantime, the engineering department says we're going to push it through.
No, my only concern is you said you wanted it so that it could never be changed. Well, we can't make it so that it can never be changed. We can make it so that we can't change it until the next meeting. But
why not?
Because
you can make it part of the motion.
And any future council could change
Pardon?
it. And you know that any future council can change it. So I'm just letting you know.
And you know what? That's the way it's been for 150 years and will continue. But in the meantime, I'm saying that this council, engraved in stone, that the pathway will remain in its natural state. Now, I don't know how much plainer I can say that, Mayor, because you know what? It's a simple motion, and if it's adopted by this council, that's part of the motion that the staff have to live with. If we don't have this motion on the floor, I don't know what's going to happen because.
Okay, that's fine. We had captured it as instruction to staff. We will now, if you wish, if it passes, an instruction to staff in a different form. We'll do that if council wishes. I actually. Okay, so that's moved.
Yeah, and I seconded it because
May will second it. Okay, so we now have an amendment on the floor. Are there any speakers to the amendment?
No.
Can I get the language of the amendment?
Back, please.
Council approve the zoning subject to the pathway remaining in its natural state.
Okay. I'm not going to be able to actually support that wording because it. Okay, Mr. Clarke.
We can have the more comprehensive wording that includes the consultation process, which I believe some councillors spoke to in the first round of debate, so that the motion is that council gives second, third, and fourth and final readings, and secondly, the path stay in its current natural state in general accordance with the opinions expressed by the residents, and that staff report back on how the city intends to consult with the Oakdale neighbourhood regarding its network of paths.
Okay. So the amendments on the floor. Any discussion on the amendment?
Well, I was on the list.
Which one are we going with?
Do I still have the floor, Your Worship?
Okay. I may. Is that you've seconded that word?
Just said it's just fine with me.
That's fine. Okay. You haven't had the floor yet, but go ahead, Councillor.
I thought I did.
Nicholson. Well, he's the one that moved the motion. You couldn't have had the floor if he moved the motion. So, but Councillor Nicholson, please take the floor.
I guess I thought I had the floor when I asked to hear what the motion was.
Okay, go ahead.
But in any event, when I did push the button, it was
a different motion.
No, well, perhaps. It seemed to me that all our needs would be met if we directed staff to report to council before making any changes to that path. But I can support it as it's presently worded, particularly at 11 o'clock.
Councillor Zarrillo. One moment, please. Don't push your button. Councillor Zarrillo, please.
So we'll be voting on this right away, so I just wanted to say that I'm totally for keeping the path the way it is, but I will be voting against it just purely based on the fact that I do not agree with the frontage that will be on Nicola. So just wanted to let you know that when I vote against it, it won't be because I don't want them to keep the path. It's because I think that we should wait on the third set or the second set of 3 lots for the frontage on Nicola.
Okay.
Perhaps you'd like to move separation.
Well, we don't have to separate because it's a rezoning bylaw, but she can vote in favor of the amendment, which creates that, and still vote against the amended motion. And I will raise a couple of concerns. One is that we actually have, we say in accordance with the residents' wishes. If you read through the package, some of the residents actually were fine with an improved roadway or
the word general accordance was entirely for that reason.
I just don't use the word general anymore because I got in trouble once. But we have to keep in mind that there are residents who don't like the current setup, and a couple of them have contacted, I'm sure they've contacted some of you as well, that there are some issues with safety when you've got a narrow path that goes the full length of 200 and something feet long. We've got residents in Ranch Park that don't like the fact that their path is actually wider than that, but they've had a murder along their path, and it's the sort of kind of issue that some residents get concerned with, and that there can happen things along these circumstances that create neighborhood concern. So I don't ever want to have us try to make it so that the future neighborhoods can't make amendments to things. I would like to see us take the land that we've talked about. I'm fine with making no improvements on the path, taking the land so that at some point a future neighborhood could decide that, okay, maybe we do want a park bench, maybe we do want some elements along this path. But I'm not trying to ram anything down this neighborhood's throat. Most neighborhoods would ask for more. This neighborhood has asked us not to give them anything more, and I'm fine with that. I'm concerned about the wording of the amendment because it does make it so that as though the rezoning is subject to this other condition, and that if the other condition doesn't take place, then you end up, to me it's a strange wording, but I won't oppose it. The amendment, Mr. Clarke.
Sorry, just on those 2 points, certainly we won't put the words subject to. There'll be 2 separate items. And I believe the will of council expressed in the first round of debate was that the city secure the right-of-way. So nothing in this motion precludes the right-of-way would be secured.
That's right. And actually, I will also make this one comment. You read through the petition. The petition is against a full access roadway. That's a petition. They went around the neighborhood this summer and they said they're proposing a highway, they're proposing a roadway, a full access roadway that goes right up there. And are you against it? And a whole bunch of people signed it. November 7th, the public information meeting, almost all of the questionnaires still referred to a full access roadway. They referred to rat running that's going to go up that roadway that we're building in between this new one. People came here tonight and had the same concerns that we're going, when they get to the top of that roadway, they're going to turn onto Chapman, and Chapman's too busy for them to turn onto Chapman. Well, we're not allowing. So it's. I think sometimes what happens is we get a thought in people's minds, and we don't communicate well enough that we've already moved off of that, and the people continue to be opposed to whatever it is we're proposing because they think it's what we used to be proposing. And so when we. Anything else? So when I think we don't communicate well enough when we make those changes. We've proposed something, we've moved off of it, and this neighborhood got angst about it, felt angst about what we had originally proposed. I don't believe there's anyone here that felt angst particularly about pavement. They felt angst about a roadway that you'd have to turn onto Chapman when you got to the end of. Maybe there's going to be a stop sign. Should it be a red light when you get to the top of this roadway? In the end, I think we're going to have people complaining that we didn't pave the pathway because all the other neighborhoods around them have paved pathways. I think we're going to hear that. But this is a great neighborhood. I love the conversations about the coyotes and the bunnies, although I suppose you don't have bunnies if you have coyotes. But I'm looking forward to hopefully working with the neighborhood on what it is they want with their pathways. The motion is an amendment. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
One in opposition.
You're opposed to the amendment? I'm sorry, Benita, did you vote? I didn't see you vote.
Yeah, I voted, but can you read, what is
this? Was only the amendment to make the path stay the way it is.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it's fine. It's perfectly normal.
I believe, as the Mayor indicated earlier, you can support this but vote against the main motion.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay, the main motion. Any further discussion? All in favor of the main motion as amended? All opposed? Councillor Zerillo is opposed. The motion carries.
The next item, second item for public hearing this evening, is the City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4440 pertaining to 707 Clarke Road. Recommendation from staff is that council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4440.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Hodge. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 concerns City of Coquitlam Heritage Revitalization Agreement Authorization Bylaw 4370, which pertains to 1121, 1123, and 1135 Brunette, 209 and 213 Tarion Street, and 208 Begin Street, as well as City of Coquitlam Heritage Designation Bylaw number 4372, which pertains to 1123 Brunette Avenue. The recommendation is that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Heritage Revitalization Agreement Authorization Bylaw number 4370 as amended, and second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Heritage Designation Bylaw 4372 as amended.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Sikora. Councillor Zerillo.
I just had one question about this one, was that I think this is wonderful. I really, improvements to that area are great. I just had safety concerns about the size of the landscaping in the trees and hidden spaces where people can be living. So that would be my concern, because I know around the original Red House over the last few years, there has been quite a bit of vagrancy and usage of that house by necessarily undesirable things in the neighborhood. So I just want to make sure that we are not creating spaces where people can hide, sleep, those sort of things, because I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to bring a really nice development to the neighborhood. So I'm not sure if that can go to staff, because I mean, each of these trees, how tall are they? How much do they obstruct the view? That sort of stuff can't really be looked at in this short amount of time. So asking the chair there, what would be the best way to approach that?
You, Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, Your Worship. I know when you look at these landscape plans, it looks like there's a whole lot of greenery there, and then there will be, but it's not at the scale of a park. It's not like a lot of empty, unobserved space. This would be on the property of the strata. There'll be a strata set up, so there'd be, in some portions, there'd be a right-of-way to allow the public to enter onto that property, but other areas, it's essentially it's private property. It's semi-public, semi-private space of the strata unit owners. So I don't think that you would have unwelcome visitors trespassing in those areas, because there will be a number of residents there themselves that'll, the eyes on the street concept will be watching those spaces. If there were problems, they would probably call the police to respond. But I don't think the landscape plan as it's been prepared will create those sort of dead zone spaces where there could be problems.
Okay. Comfortable?
No.
Nope. Okay.
What can I say? We don't think is not necessarily an assurance. That's my only concern, is that sometimes we want things to be a certain way. I think someone said it earlier, that we should look at the way the path evolves before we make the path. And I know that there has been traffic patterns evolved already in this space, and the way that the amenities building is, there is no residents at the front of that building unless they're in the party room or whatever in the amenity space. But so I would just say that I would be concerned that we make sure there is no place for illicit activity to be happening on the frontage of Brunette Avenue, because I think this is a wonderful development to help us really move that area along.
Thank you. I had a couple of quick comments, and they relate to, I'm looking at an email we received today, actually, this morning, on this one. It relates to, I'm very pleased that you're finally going to improve the neighborhood, etc., but I am concerned that the new development will allow renters. Per your reference to apartments versus condos, I believe the new complex should be owners only. There is enough crime in the neighborhood already without more transient renters coming and going. And I've said it every time we get these kinds of things, please don't do that. Half of our population rents their housing, and to suggest that they shouldn't be in your neighborhood doesn't provide a particularly good discussion related to a project like this. This, I think, is a great project. Oddly enough, the other email that we got at about the same time says, please preserve the red house, but don't allow any housing around it. And I want to explain that actually we can't preserve the red house. We don't own it. And one of the ways of getting it preserved is actually to allow some housing around it. And this is part of the deal that we've managed to strike with the landowners. In this instance, the landowners own a building that's partly burnt down. We'd have no ability to save that building without buying the property, which we've done in some cases, but this is a good way of achieving both. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. What you're bringing forward is new information. And you know, I've got difficulty with it because it should have been probably circulated to council members ahead of time.
Well, it was circulated. You didn't read it. It was circulated. You mustn't have read it.
Okay, thank you.
It's in your
That's all I
package.
wanted.
You just want to read your package.
I think that this is a great development. I think that area needs revitalization. You know, it's and I know that they're going to try and restore that old restaurant and old store. And I'll tell you what, they're going to have a chore on their hands. I mean, they're really going to have a chore on their hands, because I don't know whether it was worthwhile saving that building or not. I really don't know, because I tell you, they're going to revitalize it. It's not going to be the same as it was. So, you know, I mean, it's not going to be a heritage building per se. It used to be heritage building, but with the fire, it's no more a heritage building, especially when there's going to be over 50% of the work being done that's going to be new. You know, so those are things that I got concerned. But you know what? Those are small concerns. I think that this is a great deal. It looks very, very good. It's in a French motif, which is what the Millardville people want, and I think it's a great, going to be great development. So I'm in favor of it.
Outstanding. We're about to achieve another preservation of a heritage building. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries unanimously and enthusiastically.
Item 8 concerns a time extension of the approved period for fourth and final reading of Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4365 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4366. This pertains to 352 Marmont Street. The recommendation from staff is that Council extend the 12-month period between third and fourth and final reading of City of Coquitlam Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 4365 for an additional 6-month period, and extend the 12-month period between third reading and fourth and final reading of Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4366 for an additional 6-month period.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a whole bunch of, extensions in here. So what are they really asking for? There's one for 12 months, there's one for 6 months, and there's one that's before us today. So are they asking for an 18-month extension?
Through the chair, there's 2 bylaws that are currently sitting at third reading for this site, 352 Marmont, an OCP amendment bylaw and a rezoning bylaw. Both of those bylaws are about to expire with regard to their ability to sit at third reading for a 12-month period. We are asking that Council extend those 2 bylaws each for 1 6-month period.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, 2 different bylaws. Any further discussion? Motion is a 6-month extension. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor.
I've been opposed to this development all along, and I still am.
Yes, but it's just extending something that you lost. Councillor Reid is opposed. The motion carries. Yes.
The next item, item 9, pertains to the Tri-City Regional Transportation Task Force. The recommendation is that Council endorse the task force terms of reference as outlined in the report.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor?
Well, I have a little...
All in favor? Apparently there's no need to discuss it. Councillor O'Neill.
Well, just very quickly, one of your big things on the work plan for this transportation task force, the number one thing is the Northeast Sector Area Transit Plan. Now, I just want to make sure that that we are all aware that it's just been announced by TransLink that they're into Phase 2, the long-term vision of this, and Phase 2 involves, in our neighborhood, a meeting that took place earlier this afternoon, a meeting tomorrow from 4:30 to 6 at the Coquitlam Library City Center. So if we want to have input, we don't necessarily have to wait for the committee to give input into this plan. We should get our citizens to go down, or ourselves, to go to the Coquitlam Library City Center branch, rooms 136 and 137 at 4:30 tomorrow, because they are looking for input on the long-term vision for the Northeast Sector Area Transit Plan right now.
How was this advertised?
We got an email from Mark Erdman on Wednesday, November 20th, saying, "Consultation on now!" exclamation mark. So the committee can maybe hop to work on this, but I think I'm going to pop in myself, and anybody interested in the future of Northeast Area Transit should get in there.
And if you still have that email, could you re-forward it to those of us who might have already?
I probably do. I printed it out here, but...
There you go.
Okay.
Councillor Asmussen on the question.
Well, it's not the first item. It's one of the items that will be considered by the committee, and the plan's going to take a period of time. So the committee has time to draft responses from a Tri-Cities perspective on it in the early spring, and move forward. But it's just one of many items that we need to coordinate and work together as communities on. Thank you.
Okay, the motion. All in favor? Opposed?
Another 30 seconds, I can change my mind.
Carried unanimously. My support is dependent on getting this done by 11:30. Mr. Clarke.
Item 10 is an update on the provincial Coquitlam Dyking District status. The recommendation from staff is that Council direct staff to notify the provincial ministry that prior to the transfer of the Dyking District assets to the city, the province must address the city's concerns as identified in this report, complete all repairs identified in the assessment report, and upgrade the dikes to the agricultural standard crest elevation.
I moved it. Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Hodge. Discussion, all kinds of discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. I have one item I will be raising, as is my authority, in raising the issue of 283 Hart. I'd like to bring back that application before Council. The 283 Hart Street, the daycare one. I'd like to put that back on the floor. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, as the mayor, the motion comes back without a motion to reconsider. You have that direct authority.
I know.
So,
is there a motion?
The motion that comes back before council, as if it had not been previously considered, is that council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4434.
Is there a motion?
I'd move we refer this to staff for an early report.
Moved by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to refer to staff. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Reid is opposed. Councillor Sikora is opposed. Motion carries. That's all I had.
There are no further formal items on this agenda.
Move to adjourn. Councillor Asmundson and Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? 11:25. Motion carries. If we could, do any of the audience members that are still here have any questions on tonight's agenda? Are there any questions on tonight's agenda? Please take as long as you like. Thank you all. 12 hours and 25